Looking tired over there, buddy.
Really?
Yeah, just a little bit. I'm not looking any better, so.
Happy Monday, my
Happy
friends.
Monday. Welcome back on the gravel, folks. You already know how it is. It's an early Monday morning for us here in the studio. Not as early as we would have hoped for, but that's okay. We're going to be doing the best we can.
Definitely a bit tired today, though.
Yeah, but the weekend we both had kind of...
It warranted this.
It warranted it. I graduated from college and got to celebrate with my family and did the stage walk and all that stuff. You had a busy work weekend.
That included helping your family celebrate.
Yeah, we came into your restaurant and celebrated with you. That was very, very fun. So, yeah, thank you.
It was a nice weekend.
We'll start it off this week with no F1 race, sadly, but that's okay. We got plenty of other stuff to talk about today.
I mean, this weekend was the 24 Hour of Le Mans.
Exactly.
So that is the perfect cover for an F1 off week.
Absolutely. Starting off, I don't know why. The windows are closed, so I don't know. Background audio might be an issue, but Charles needs Leo at these races, man.
Yeah, I saw that crazy stat. It popped up on my feed that ever since he got Leo, he would finish on the podium every single race that he brought Leo to, and then the first one that he didn't bring him to, he had this whole engine
power unit failure or whatever. I don't know, man. He needs the dog.
That dog is also one of the cutest
it's so
animals
cute.
I've ever seen in my entire life.
It's such a lucky animal to be alive. Just the lifestyle and everything it's doing is...
Well, I think that dog also perfectly suits Charles Leclerc,
Yes.
just in the sense that it seems that Leo is as polished and pristine as the world likes to think that Charles is.
I don't think that's a far-off statement, so... Otherwise, he was quoted to the media saying that it's not a great sign to change your power unit constantly. No, I don't know what happened today. I was 1 second slower than everyone else.
And that was obviously regarding his performance last week in Canada.
Yeah.
But it is kind of a big worry just with how your allotments are and the regulations when it comes to, power units, control electronics, turbocharge, like whatever. There's a very strict limit on those, and they've slowly started increasing the allotment as we've increased the amount of races on the calendar. But I think it's still only 4 or 5 power units. One power unit's supposed to last you 5 to 6 races, and I think Charles has gone through
3 now?
2 or 3, yeah. So that's almost a guaranteed grid penalty at some race at some point this season. And it'll probably happen at Monza like it always does, unless Charles takes, pole position. It's like, we don't want to lose this opportunity that we're poised, to win in front of the Tifosi. But that's typically where it happens. So, yeah, I'd be ready for that. But the Ferrari's not the most reliable car this year, it seems like. I mean, Carlos Sainz DNFing in Australia with that. No. I totally just lost it. It was Max Verstappen. Oh my goodness. I am so sorry. It is so early. I'm so tired.
I mean, I think you saying the Ferrari being kind of inconsistent is not a far off thing of saying, just because, Canada obviously first double DNF since Azerbaijan in 2022 for that team. I don't know. I mean, they were also predicted to do a lot better this weekend.
I think that's where it really lies, just in the fact that Fred Vasseur and Ferrari personnel have very much hyped up like every single upgrade package that's come to the car. And it's kind of putting this weight on the fans' shoulders that we are anticipating like a genuine challenge for victory every single week and kind of like dominating some of these racetracks, and it really hasn't happened. Monaco is an outlier as well because it's such a qualifying heavy track. You can really put the car higher than it should be just because there's so little room for error at a track like Monaco. Like in reality, a Mercedes could have put it on pole position with the 4th best car, but to have just hooked the lap together better, that's something that Monaco kind of does. So, yeah, I know they're supposed to be bringing an upgrade package in Spain next week. I heard they were kind of fast tracking that package just because of how bad Canada was. So I'm interested to see how that is, but who knows? It might fall into the same trend of just let down after let
down. Yeah, I feel that, man. Did Perez crash for the safety car on purpose? Now, this was brought up by Jensen Button at his certain whatever broadcast he was talking on to.
So
I was going to say, please give me your opinion.
I think the question shouldn't be, did Perez crash for the safety car on purpose? Because the answer to that question is no. But the way he handled the situation post-crash
did raise questions.
Did raise a lot of questions.
I mean, I think let's just kind of go through the circumstances again.
Yeah,
so
because it was an
Lando was a
interesting
9-second lead before Checo crashed with himself, right? No, him and Sainz and Albon all crashed together, kind of.
Yeah, Checo had his incident, and then when Carlos and Alex got to that part of the track, then they had their incident.
Mm-hmm. So, 3-car crash. RB was struggling until that moment, and Max was not winning the race until after the safety car.
Yeah.
But Checo was also recently called out for his crappy performance after what we thought was a 2-year contract, but it's actually more of a 1+1 year.
Yeah.
That was said by Helmut Marko and Christian Horner sometime this week.
Yeah, but I think the big point with this whole situation, and it was so crazy because I saw some people online comparing it to like Crashgate in 2008. Yeah. Where Nelson Piquet Jr. crashed to bring out the safety car so Fernando Alonso could, his crazy pit strategy could end up working for him to win the race. I don't think it's something as crazy as that. It's not that Perez deliberately crashed, but it's more when you listen to his radio on his way back to the pit lane. It was obviously the car was not in a safe condition to drive around the track. But you'd hear him and his engineer talking about how necessary it is for you to, try and come back around to the pits, because the problem is if he hadn't, attempted to go back to the pit lane, the car was in a safe enough condition as to where he could just pull off the track and, not cause a safety car at all. He was deliberately
trying to drive back.
Yeah, trying to drive back on the track where, there's going to be a much higher probability of a safety car when there's a car driving around that doesn't have a rear wing on, pieces falling all over the ground. I think Kevin Magnussen is a huge example of that at a lot of races. I think Canada literally last year, K-Mag had like a piece of his front wing end plate was hanging off from a little collision he had, and he was getting the black and orange flag to, force him to come into the pit lane. And I'm guessing Sergio Perez got the same kind of thing. I mean, black and orange flag is you have to go into the pit lane to repair the car. But yeah, I think it's just a bit shoddy. It's just because it's Max's teammate. If this was anybody else,
it would be a whole situation.
It would be different. That's just a lucky safety car for Max Verstappen. But I think Perez's attempt to bring it back to the pit lane should definitely raise some eyes, because I don't think any other driver would have attempted to bring it back to the pits.
I agree with that. I'm sorry, I was yawning while you finished your point.
That's okay.
Logan Sargent is not going to be in the sport next year. I think we can all agree on that, and it kind of seems like Williams is trying to go for, Carlos Sainz, maybe another experienced driver. And this kind
There's
of
also the threat of potentially Kimi Antonelli taking his seat
yeah.
for like half a year and then going to Mercedes next year.
So that's my thing right now is I saw this question posed online where with the target cap, or like with the, what's it called, budget cap,
Yeah.
I think like a lot of more teams aren't going to go with younger, less experienced drivers.
Which also raises like the question, how do these young drivers get the experience then?
Exactly. But the whole idea behind it is really just on merit for if they crash the car a lot or have
Yeah.
small crashes, that still adds up a lot and eats into your total value. And that's kind of what happened to Williams with Logan over the last 2 years, where
Yeah.
he's crashed just so much over the last 2 years that, you know, at Monaco, they had to run a 2023 spec because they didn't have enough 2024 spec parts for the car. It becomes this issue, and I feel like it's going to become a bigger issue unless the cap is raised a little more, which I don't want it to be, just because I feel like the way it works right now works
Well,
so
it'll
well.
also give the teams with bigger pockets more ways to exploit,
Yeah.
I guess, that extra amount of cash.
So that's my 2 cents on
I
that
was going
whole
to say,
thing.
I think it's plainly obvious to anybody with a brain that Logan Sargent is likely going to be losing that seat. That's for sure. And he's kind of, you know, obviously he's definitely the one at fault for most of what's going on. But I mean, in this specific season, I don't think Williams has given him much help. So it kind of sucks because when the pressure isn't super hard on him, he is a genuinely phenomenal racing driver. But I guess maybe F1 might just not be his bread
Discretion.
and butter.
Yeah.
Maybe he goes tries out WEC, goes home, does
a
IndyCar.
Brendan Hartley.
Yeah. I mean, there's real potential for that, and he could probably excel in another form of motorsport.
Absolutely. I don't think we will lose like his name
Yeah, of course.
from racing as a whole, but I do think he will kind of go in the background or go to WEC, kind of like De Vries did,
Yeah. Or Schumacher.
or Schumacher or Kobayashi. Like, there's so many that we could compare him to, but
Exactly.
I don't know. It sucks, but you know, I don't think A, he will be the last American driver. B, I don't think he'll be the last American driver in the sport in like 3 years. Like, I think there will be another one.
Potentially.
Hopefully. Just nice to see an American on the grid, you know?
I don't need it.
I
but
don't
it's
need
nice
it,
to
but
have.
yes, it is nice to have. The chance of hearing the national anthem at a race is always a fun little...
Dude, that's the closest we'll get to that is if Andretti gets onto the grid and then wins a race.
But that
I don't know
might
how
not
real
happen.
of a possibility that is, though.
Going over to Zach Brown real quick, he was kind of talking shit to the other teammates and to the other team bosses, especially. But he was quoted saying to the media that Red Bull is in a pretty toxic environment right now. And I'm going to have to agree that most of these teams seem slightly toxic.
I feel like all of the teams have this
Toxic.
very toxic side to them.
But it's like...
Except Williams. They're the poster child of perfection.
Yeah. Caring.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think it's like kind of what Zach Brown's saying, and I'm going to continue what he says before I go off on my tangent. But
Yeah.
he said that Newey's departure is an important one because I think a lot of people at Red Bull started working with him. I already mentioned that there was some resumes circulating, which, I mean, we all know that is true already just because Red Bull and Mercedes have been going back and forth so much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that happens all the time, but you see a higher level of discomfort with this. I also think that in the future, it will be more difficult with sponsors because they're going to have to examine carefully what they are associated with, and that's a tricky situation. The whole Verstappen drama as well. Is he staying or leaving? Max has a contract, but his father's pretty outspoken. My thing about this is the sponsors part. I think that's a huge, huge aspect that not many people really think about. And we did a good section on it last week, and I believe there was a video talking about it too, about how important Checo is overall just for that team to get money because they have so many Mexican sponsors.
We looked at earlier this week. Yeah.
It's a really cool video, but they have like Telemundo,
Kit Kat.
Kit Kat-
Nestle,
Kit
yeah,
Kat,
like Nestle Mexico.
Nestle Mexico,
Patron
Patron.
Tequila.
So you have all these big companies that are essentially there because of Checo. And with him leaving potentially in 2 years, that brings up the issue of how are they going to make money then? And, you know, it's Red Bull, so they have a little bit more leeway. And
I was going to say, they'll still have their title deal with
yes.
Oracle.
Absolutely.
But I think a main chunk of their I guess, subsidiary sponsors are Checo based, I guess. Like Max Verstappen to me doesn't have a bunch of
Mega contracts.
mega contracts. I mean, I know he has one with EA Sports, but
He's like a partner for them, right?
I don't know. He's kind of like a face for them almost.
Spokes figure or something.
Yeah, so I know he definitely gets paid for doing that. Because I know nobody else on the grid has a deal with EA Sports like Max does. But yeah, Checo brings close to, if not like the number one amount of sponsors from any single driver on the grid.
Because you have a whole country.
Yeah, I mean, and you have the same. I'd say like number two is Guan Yu Zhou,
Yes.
with all of his Chinese-based sponsors
absolutely.
too. So yeah, I think Red Bull would do fine without Checo. Like they'd figure it out after a year, but they would definitely lose a lot of money.
My whole thing with the toxic teams is just like how Mercedes celebrated with George last week, but didn't with Lewis a few years ago. You don't see that with other teams really, but you do kind of see a very hard divide between the teams, almost between like the team that's working on one car versus the other car.
It's so interesting, though. It really seems that, not to go on a tangent, but it really seems that Mercedes wants Lewis Hamilton out of the car. Or they might be getting to that point in the season now, given it's his last year, where they stop telling him stuff about the car just so he can't take that information over to Ferrari. But it's very interesting to kind of see, I don't want to say the relationship that he has with Mercedes disintegrate, but it's definitely not as strong as it's been in the past, and it is, ticking down a little bit.
Yeah. Going on to the next point real quick. Still kind of with McLaren, so it's important. To continue, according to Lando Norris, he believes that at the minute it's between Ferrari and McLaren. And I want to hear what you think about this.
I did see this.
Because, Max was quoted, 2 weeks ago, last week, where someone was like, "Oh, McLaren and Ferrari have scored more points than you in the last 3 races," and he's like, "Yeah, well, they have 2 cars."
Yeah.
And he's speaking like, God, this is why I love Max. It's just because when he's in that press room,
He doesn't care.
he doesn't care, but he's also just speaking facts, no printer.
Yeah.
If my my mom had balls, she'd be my dad. Like, he's just been on a roll.
He's
this
on
year.
a rip.
Yeah.
Dude, he's got to get comedy in the podcast somehow.
Facts.
But I think it's a really fair point from Lando because, I feel like some people would read into this and be like, what do you mean it's between Ferrari and McLaren? Max Verstappen's leading the Drivers' Championship.
Which is what I have written on the doc.
Yeah, but it's the fact that the Constructors' Championship is
up
between
for
2
grabs.
different drivers. I mean, in 2021, Max Verstappen won the Drivers' Championship with Red Bull, but Mercedes won the Constructors. And the same thing could realistically happen this time. I think Ferrari and McLaren are way more consistent with both of their drivers, just in the sense that, not that they're finishing so high, but Oscar and Lando are finishing very close to each other every single week. Carlos and Charles are finishing very close to themselves every single week. The gap between Max and Checo is so vast that, Max having a crappy weekend and finishing P3, you can't really trust that Checo is going to finish in the points. Whereas, Lando could finish P2 and Oscar could have a quote-unquote bad weekend and finish P5, and then McLaren still outscores Red Bull. Mm-hmm. So I think Lando's comment may be a bit outlandish, but there's definitely a bit of truth to that.
Yeah, I just thought it was a really interesting point, and like you said, kind of rings of 2021. So
Yeah, absolutely.
my next point is going off the Hyundai rumors about them wanting to join the sport, but they've been talking with Alpine.
Yeah, I was surprised by this because it kind of just popped onto my feed like completely randomly in one day. Just to see that, Audi's obviously bought their way in now. Then you had Andretti and now Hyundai. I don't think Alpine would sell though. Like, is it in as bad of a position
Are
as
we
they
going
are
back
in?
to this discussion or argument, if you would like to say, where we argue which teams we think are for sale, and my two are Williams and
Alpine?
Alpine, because I don't
I don't
know
think
who
any.
else you could buy.
For me, it's just nobody.
So they're just FIA is just telling them to go F off, essentially.
Yeah. I don't see any teams selling, but I don't know. Hyundai has very big pockets, just like
And Alpine does like to, sell and rebuy. So
I could see it happening. I don't want it to.
no one wants it to.
Well, no. I do want it to in the sense that to have another, works manufacturer would be really cool. But I also love having Alpine be awful in F1. I think it's entertaining.
And in WEC.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, dude. This was a tough week for Alpine.
This was a tough week for Alpine. You want to see what other teams it was a tough Canada race week for?
Absolutely.
We have
Rapid fire.
some damage reports done in Canada. We have 317,000 by Checo, 230,000 by Albon,
Buy signs.
200. Okay,
Hey, come on, you know what I'm saying.
took me a moment, but yes, I do now. 217,000 by Signs, 202,000 by Zhao, 192,000 by Logan, and 5,000 to Max. And apparently, I'm kind of glad that we didn't go to this race, Oliver, because I heard that general admission tickets took like 2 to 3 hours to get off the island.
Yeah. I've heard in the past that getting to and from that race is actually extraordinarily difficult, which is so funny because when I would like look at planning this, it's like, okay, they have a full like subway transit system, and one of the subway stops is right on the island, right on the track. But then just to think how busy that was, and I remember last year when our buddy Jack went to the Canadian GP, there's a video that he sent me of how busy that subway station was after the race. Like, it was unreal, like nothing I'd ever seen in any big city before. So to see that it was, like 2 or 3 hours has absolutely no surprise to me.
Continuing on, we have Williams may have offered Carlos Sainz a 4-year deal. He still doesn't have a seat for next year, which is a huge pain for a lot of people because he is a talented driver. He's won 2 races in the last 2 years. He was the only other person besides a Red Bull person to win last year. So
Yeah.
he's talented. We know that. But, it's 2-year plus 2-year extension after that. And I feel like this deal is mainly just to see how he does in 2026 and see if he likes the car, if the car's working, if that engine's really working for him.
Because I
But
know
does
the
he do
drive
it?
of the Mercedes engine has been a
It's
point
always
of
been,
talking.
yes.
Because a lot of these Mercedes customers are very
Excited.
I was going to say excited and trusting of the fact that Mercedes is going to put a really good power unit on the table. And Williams is definitely using that in their bargaining power. So I think Carlos should accept the deal.
I think he should too. I think this is the best deal that he's been offered. And
It's also a phenomenal team dynamic of Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon.
yeah,
Like that team could rip it up if that car turns out to be good.
I already hear Crofty calling them the Red Bull rejects.
100%. Which I think, you know what? David Croft, you can step to the side. Alex Jakes has my heart.
Unlike what I said last week, Daniel Rick does not have an extension yet. It was recently said by Horner that he will have to work hard to retain his seat. And yeah, I mean, that's anyone in the racing world.
Literally anybody on the grid needs to work hard to retain that seat.
So I'm taking that with a grain of salt, but it was more so just the correction of last week's mistake.
I guess it's just the fact that, why would you want to retain a seat that isn't going to lead to anything else?
Yeah.
Go enjoy life or something. Like, Danny, I love you, but I don't know.
Go race WEC.
Yeah, try out a hypercar or a GT3 car or something like that.
Go reconnect with your old teammate, Daniel Kvyat.
The F1 dream is over, Daniel Ricciardo.
How do you
go?
How do you feel
Sorry.
about the sprint race? Like the amount of sprint weekends that
Enough.
we have.
I think 6 is perfect.
I agree.
I'd be okay if we went up to 8, but I don't know. Well, maybe like what could be cool is if you put all 6 of the sprint races into the same 6 race stretch. So you have like
so they
the
all happen at the same.
you have the sprint section of the calendar or something.
Seems like a lot.
yeah,
just
but
like a lot.
I don't know, but the entire calendar is a lot.
Yeah, I understand. But this whole point came from the Canadian Grand Prix race promoter, Francois Dumontier.
I think that was perfect.
I think that's the closest that I'm going to get to it. He prefers the traditional format for Montreal, and I think a lot of people are agreeing with him on that. He would rather keep the Montreal race to a 3-day format with practice, quali, and race day, just because, getting that many people on and off the island, and it's hard. It's not easy. And sprints do take up a lot of manpower. They take up extra time. They take up a lot of extra components.
They take up a lot of practice time from the teams.
Absolutely. So,
like, I feel like there's just some tracks that it works at and some that it doesn't. Like, your classic examples of good tracks for sprint races are the Red Bull Ring and Brazil. Like, are like the 2 very notable ones. Yeah, I don't think we should do any more than 6, now that I'm really thinking about it.
and it originally started with 3, and a lot of people thought that was a lot. And so them
and
doubling
the points
it
were different. It was only 3 points for P1, 2 points for P2, 1 point for P3. Now we're doing 8 to 1.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, the sprint format has changed every single year since it was introduced in 2021.
All right. This one got me heated. Okay. Just because it was a stupid article title, and I hate it. But the headline, which paints the mechanics as just idiots, read, Mercedes believe they finally understand the ground effect cars. Okay? That was what it said. What they were meaning by that is that they feel like they finally have a balanced car in this spec.
Yes. Keep the camera on yourself
which
for a
is
minute.
just a whole separate thing. You're getting up and stretching, which is not something I expected. But as James Allison said, the new wing has made the car easier to drive, more balanced, and perhaps the car has become more driver-friendly, something that they were struggling with a lot at the beginning of the year. Total Wolff, however, kept his feet on the ground. It's important not to get carried away by enthusiasm because F1 is a difficult sport. But we have a positive trajectory from the last 3 races, and everything seems to make much more sense between the factory and the track. The rest will be told by the stopwatch. They also seem to be trying to roll out their next upgrade package as well, like Ferrari at Spain, just because they had such good recent success and would like to stay in the competition.
Yes. Sorry, to those that are not seeing the video, I'm currently standing up right now because it is so unbelievably hot in here.
It is very hot, and we're doing our best.
My pants and my shirt are actually molding to my my skin. Yeah,
Oh, that's so
it's
sweet.
very unbearable. Yeah, I mean, I have a great relationship with my clothes, but I'll lock back in.
Well, we'll finish these last 2 points so you can get into your Le Mans recap, because I know you're very excited.
My quick fire Le Mans recap. Yes.
Yes, Le Mans happened. Ferrari has won 2 of the 3 Triple Crown events this year, as they are unable to win the 3rd as its IndyCar. But hey, I think that's a tremendous accomplishment.
I think it's also crazy that just Ferrari back-to-back wins at Le Mans after not having won for a
while.
60-plus year period.
It was crazy to learn about the 1966 Le Mans, I believe it is.
Give or take, you're off maybe a year.
I think it's
You're
65
really
or
close.
66, but it's just a very interesting race. And Vin Wiki, great YouTube channel on YouTube. They do a lot of car stories, and they actually are super interesting. So go check out that video. I genuinely enjoyed it.
Yeah, I got to take a peek at that.
The FIA is tweaking the age rule to let Kimi Antonelli into the sport, and I have said this again and again, but I want to stop talking about him until he's just in the sport. But
I just think what's crazy to me is the fact that they didn't tweak that rule for somebody like Colton Herta. When Alpha Tauri was trying to snipe him in 2022, 2023. The same with like Pato O'Ward. I guess Pato O'Ward had enough super license points and was old enough, but I don't know. It's very strange that the exemptions have not been made in the past for other drivers. So why is Kimi this godsend of a racing prodigy? I don't really understand.
I mean, I guess you could ask the same question about Max when he was coming up.
Yeah, but that rule didn't exist.
But they made it because of Max.
But here's the thing. Why? Because he showed promise immediately.
Because he went from karting to
F3 to F1.
Yeah. I don't think that is fair in
That's true.
In the sense of there's people that are working for it. Do I think if you're talented enough that you should be given the opportunity? Absolutely. So that's where this rule kind of is the mediator. And, if there's a way where, hey, if they have enough super license points, Jesus, before they are 18, consider them. They don't have to be accepted, but consider them for the sport because there might be, and especially in this case, you have a whole country behind him with the Italian driver.
I guess for me, it's just, do you really have to sit back and think about this and say, like, with this tweak to the rules, is Kimi Antonelli really the next coming of Max Verstappen? Because that's what the FIA believes.
Yeah. I think that's a good spot to leave the F1 spot for this weekend and kind of let that story brew some more, and then we can break it down. Because it really depends on now if he signs if he's the Mercedes driver, if he's a Williams driver for the rest of the year. Like, it really just all depends on these next few weeks. But
yeah. But like we were saying, I'm not going to go super hard into Le Mans this week. I wanted to, but I was just so busy that I only got to catch about 2 hours of the race live.
2 more hours than I saw.
That's fair. I watched from I want to say 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. So I got to catch the 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. portion of the race in France, which is really cool. That's the part I care about watching the most. Just seeing all those headlights, in the dark, it's just so gorgeous. But as you know, it's one of the 3 events in the fabled Triple Crown of Motorsport, the others being the Indy 500 and the Monaco GP. As Raven said, Ferrari won both of their allotted events in the Triple Crown. But qualifying when it came to going around the purpose-built and street circuit of Le Mans, the fight for the hyperpole was really tense, actually, and it went right down to the flag. You had the number 2 Cadillac on its final run as the checkered flag was coming down. They took provisional pole with a stunning lap, setting a 3:24.782. For those of you that don't know, Le Mans is a very long track.
I think it's 8 miles.
I was gonna say it's double the length of Spa.
Let me double check.
For those that know Spa, being the longest track in F1, I think it's about 15 kilometers, something like that. But so many people were surprised with the Cadillac's lap. People didn't think it was going to get eclipsed, but then you had one of the last cars to cross the line. It was a late charge from the number 6 Porsche Penske. They put it on pole at the last gasp.
13.626 kilometers, 8.5 miles.
Okay, so yeah, damn near double the length of Spa.
Yeah.
Yeah, the number 6 Porsche at the last gasp took pole position with a time of 3:24.634, so about a tenth and a half faster. Literally using all of the available track in the final chicane to scrape by and spoil the party in the Cadillac garage, because a lot of people thought they were going to get investigated after qualifying for how wide they went. But honestly, it wasn't to be for the number 2 Cadillac, because they were set to serve a 5-place grid penalty from Spa last week, so it really didn't matter. Pole for the LMP2 category, which for those of you that don't know, LMP2 is not racing at all of the races in WEC this year. I can't remember why that was a thing, but when it comes to Le Mans specifically, all the LMP2 cars are there. But pole for the LMP2 category was snatched by the number 14 Autumn Oaks racing car with a time of 3:33.217, nearly 8/10 faster than the number 28 IDEX Sport entry in P2. And I think it's interesting to note that the LMP2 cars are only around 6 or 7 seconds a lap slower than the hypercars. It's a very close battle between them. But when it came to LMGT3, the number 70 car from Inception Racing spoiled the party for the competition with a time of 3:58.120, over 8/10 faster than the number 92 entry from Purex Racing. So it was very dominant qualifying in LMP2 and GT3 for me, but the hypercar hyperpole was crazy. When it comes to the race, I'm kind of really only going to cover the hypercar category because it's very difficult to
Go over everything.
go over everything. But it's a 24-hour race. A lot can happen, and this year was chaotic. Raven and I, as I said, didn't get time to watch most of the race, but there was still plenty of notable moments to write home on. From the beginning, the Ferrari was looking like the leaders to set the pace. Both the 50 and 51 entrants took the lead from the Porsche Penske pole-sitting number 6 car. Rain was kind of inevitable as well throughout this race, and you kind of immediately saw a lot of strategic gambles when the first dishing of rain come out. Some, jumped straight into the pits, threw some wets on. Some tried to hang it out. Hanging it out obviously turned out to be the right option. It was the lightest section of rain that we saw in the race. And because of that, the number 83 Ferrari kind of took off and began to build a gap behind as the track dried. 7 hours in, around 10 o'clock, the rain returned way heavier than last time, with wet weather runners lapping nearly 30 seconds faster than their dry counterparts. Now, one of the moments of the race, the one that Raven and I had talked about the most, was at 10:30 in the number 83 Ferrari. Robert Kubica came up to lap the number 15 BMW driven by Dries Van Thor. However, the Belgian attempted to defend for all of his might over this overtake, as if he was passed, he would have been lapped by Kubica. And with how much it was raining, all that stuff that was going on, you really don't want to get caught off the lead lap on a long safety car like that. So he defended as hard as he possibly could. And of course, because of that, a collision was inevitable. Kubica, his right rear tapped the front of Van Thor's front left, and it sent him across the track into the wall. So Kubica ended up getting a 30-second penalty in the Ferrari. The BMW retired from the race. But that was kind of the end of the number 83 Ferrari, that beautiful, beautiful yellow Ferrari in the race, because later in the race, an electrical fire in the pit lane saw that Ferrari retire from the race for good, which was kind of like a little bit of karma. As Raven and I hinted on earlier, both the Alpine A424s suffered engine failures.
I do want to say about that, though.
Yeah.
They were dominating for that because they were LMP2 or G.
No, they were hypercars.
They were hyper. Okay. So
I don't want to say they were dominating, but they were having a very good race.
they were doing a very good race for A, their first time in the sport, and B, the first time these two cars were really pushing for that long.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a 24-hour race, like you're saying. People don't understand the full, like, they're racing 24 hours unless, like, at one point, I think there was
really
three
don't think
safety
people
cars.
understand the magnitude of a
Well,
24-hour
I don't think
long
people
race.
fully understand the length of the track either, because there was 3 safety cars and 9 slow zones at one point on
Yeah.
an 8-mile track.
There was, funny enough, I didn't actually write this down on my outline, but in the middle of the night, there was a 4-hour-long safety car. Like, it was crazy. But, yeah, both the A424s suffered engine failures. And, it's their first time in the hypercar category, so it might just be, learning the reliability of the car. There's still a lot more work that you have to do. But it kind of dashed the dreams of what little fan base Alpine has. All your F1 fans coming over to watch Alpine and WEC, you got the classic. So hope you're happy. But through the night, the Porsche Penske, Toyota Gazoo, and Ferrari AF Course cars were kind of silently duking it out at the front, given those super long safety cars in the middle of the night. There's no one overtaking, not many attacks. They were talking about how discipline was kind of the order of the night, kind of waiting for somebody to make the first move, and you go after that. It was a lot of saving fuel, avoiding mistakes, that kind of stuff. But we get today back into the daylight pretty nicely. 7 hours from the end, 11 cars were still on the lead lap, and it shocks me once we really get to the end. But the Ferraris once again pulled away from the field. The rain did return a little bit for about an hour from the end of the race, for like 15, 20 minutes. Not enough to chuck people onto the wet tires, but enough to make it an intense battle for the end of the race. But it ended up being the number 50 Ferrari winning the hypercar category. So back-to-back Ferrari wins at Le Mans, which, as a Ferrari fan myself, I was super, super happy about. The number 22 United Autosports entry won in the LMP2 category, and then the number 91 Manthey EMA LMGT3 won. Notably with 2 rookie drivers in the car as well, which I thought was incredible. But yeah, it was such a phenomenal Le Mans. I mean, from watching the few hours that I got to watch live and then seeing the highlights after, I'm kind of disappointed I didn't get to watch more live, because this race is always a cracker, especially when the rain comes in. So to have been treated to rain this year, and when I watched like 12 hours of it last year, it was really nice. So that is my little Le Mans section for this year.
It was beautiful.
I'm sorry that I couldn't get more, but I got the necessary stuff.
I will run through Rally, Moto, and IndyCar for you, because you did a beautiful Le Mans recap for us. So starting with Rally, there's no Rally until Poland in 9 days. For IndyCar,
I will say, I'm stealing this one, bro.
Oh.
Next race is the Firestone Grand Prix of Monterey. The reason I'm stealing this is because it's held at Laguna Seca, which is my favorite track in all of the United States of America. If you've never seen or heard of Laguna Seca, just look up the Corkscrew at Laguna Seca. It is one of the coolest complexes of corners in all of motorsports. But that is a week from yesterday, so we have that coming up this weekend. So I'm super excited to talk about that. But I'll let it go back to you for Moto.
For Moto, we have nothing until the end of the month in actual Moto. But we did have the Isle of Man TT last week.
Yeah.
And I would like to shout out Davey Todd for winning the Isle of Man TT. That's a very impressive race to win.
Have you seen the highlights yet?
I watched some of them.
I was going to say, because I wanted to pull those up at some point.
Some of the crash highlights, because those are just always around.
Yeah.
And then I watched some of the best overtakes.
Okay.
So just some very, very short stuff.
Of course.
That will be wrapping it up for us. It's a little bit of a shorter episode, albeit I had my graduation this weekend. I had family in town. I'm super tired.
It's 100 degrees outside.
Yeah, it's hot. We're sweating. The studio doesn't have any air.
I was going to say, we don't have any AC in here.
So I will be doing the Good Morning Hockey Show right after this. But
I will be going straight to work.
Yeah,
would you
like to carry us out like you always do?
Yes, I would. For our audio listeners, I appreciate you guys tuning in every single week. It's always nice to have you here, listening to our voices. It makes what we do a lot more special, so I appreciate you guys. But for those watching on YouTube, last week's video on this side of my head, subscribe on my face this week.
Oh.
Yeah, you were not ready for that.
Not.
But yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. I appreciate y'all. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, I just want to say...
Threw up the sketch finger for some reason. I don't know why.
Just want to say thank you guys for everything. Thank you guys for listening. Wherever you find it, go check out Good Morning Hockey. Wherever you find it, go check out the interview series. They just did... Brendan just interviewed Oliver. It was a fantastic watch. I watched all of it last night.
Yeah, if you want to see me be a tiny bit less of a robot.
It was fun. It was great to see you guys just riff back and forth. So go check that out. That's on YouTube too, so you can go see their beautiful faces. But we will be back next week, right back on the gravel for you guys.
With the Spanish GP.
We'll catch you next time.
Peace
Later,
out, guys.
everyone.